The moment you watch this video, you may realize you're not here out of ordinary curiosity. There's a vibration within you, one you can't quite put your finger on, but which feels incredibly familiar. It's as if you've lived this moment before. The same words, similar emotions, a familiar inner silence. While your mind tries to label it as a new experience, it's something entirely different at a conscious level, because consciousness doesn't perceive time as a linear line. For consciousness, time is like a field where frequencies overlap. That's why some moments give you a feeling of inexplicable closeness. This feeling doesn't come from memory. It comes from frequency recognition. In quantum mechanics, this is called the observer effect. The observer isn't just someone looking. The observer is the one who chooses reality. Without realizing it, you carry a specific frequency signature at your conscious level, and this signature attracts possibilities that suit you. The same people, similar conversations, recurring scenarios. None of this is a mental coincidence. It's the natural consequence of consciousness remaining at the same vibration. What feels familiar isn't the events themselves, but the state of consciousness they evoke in you. Sometimes a moment comes when a sentence pops into your head. There's something here. You don't know exactly what it is, but you feel it. This feeling isn't frightening. It's more like a slight jolt. It's as if the same record has been spinning for a long time, and the needle makes the same sound as before it's first stuck. This sound indicates a crack in consciousness, because the moment consciousness becomes aware, it can no longer observe in the same way. There's no obligation to stay on the same frequency. There's only habit. This feeling of familiarity points to a threshold that most people ignore. It's easy to suppress this feeling in the flow of daily life. The mind immediately produces an explanation, distracts, and closes the subject. But there are moments when this feeling doesn't retreat. It's not insistent, but it's constant. It doesn't force itself upon you. It's simply there. In the quantum realm, this is interpreted as a new possibility touching consciousness. It hasn't happened yet, but it has been noticed. And nothing that is noticed continues in the same way. What you are experiencing right now is not a declaration of awakening. It doesn't need grand words either. It is a silent recognition. It is when consciousness begins to observe its own boundaries from the outside for the first time. You are still in the same life, in the same body, in the same conditions. The only thing that changes is the location of your point of observation. And this small change has the most powerful effect in the quantum field, because reality is concerned with where you are looking from, not what you want. This familiar feeling doesn't force you anywhere. It doesn't ask you to do anything. It only asks you to notice. Because awareness is the purest act of consciousness. When you notice this moment, your mind slows down. Inner monologues stop for a short time. A void is created. This void is where the old cycles no longer work. The quantum effect begins precisely here. There is no change in the external world yet, but the direction has already changed at the level of consciousness. And when this direction changes, the timelines also slowly begin to shift. You're coming to this video, reading these sentences, recognizing this feeling. None of this is random. Due to the layered nature of time, some states of consciousness become accessible again at different moments. That's why this feeling reaches you not from the past, but as if it's coming from the depths of the field of consciousness. In the quantum realm, every possibility exists simultaneously, but not all are observed. What is observed is that which is consistent with consciousness. This familiarity stems from consciousness having long been looking at the same set of possibilities. The same kinds of experiences, similar emotional responses, recurring inner monologues, all are outward manifestations of a frequency signature. As long as this signature remains unchanged, reality does not change form either. But when awareness emerges, the field of observation widens, and consciousness can for the first time sense alternative possibilities. This intuition is often inexpressible. It is not a thought nor an emotion. It is more of an internal state of knowing. That silent moment when consciousness begins to observe itself. When this moment arrives, nothing in the external world seems to have changed. People are the same. The environment is the same. Life flows in the same way. The only thing that changes is your internal point of reference. And at the quantum level, the greatest ruptures begin precisely in these invisible shifts. Although reality is perceived as a fixed structure existing externally, it doesn't operate that way at the conscious level. According to the quantum perspective, reality takes shape the moment it is observed. The observer is not merely a being looking, it is a point of consciousness that selects, directs, and assigns meaning. This is why it is no coincidence that the mind instantly recognizes certain experiences. When the mind encounters a new event, it doesn't first look at the data, but first at the frequency. If that frequency has been experienced before, the event is labeled as familiar. This labeling happens within seconds and often goes unnoticed. The mind's recognition reflex has developed as a survival mechanism. The unknown is perceived as a threat, while the familiar is considered safe. However, this mechanism becomes limiting when consciousness expansion begins, because the mind continues to filter the present with patterns learned in the past. The same types of people, similar problems, recurring emotional responses. These are not the insistence of the external world, but the unchanging observation point. As long as the observer remains in the same place, the scene they see does not change. In the quantum field, this is called the observer loop. The consciousness repeatedly turns to the familiar set of possibilities. This cycle often goes unnoticed because the mind accepts it as normal. It even teaches us to say, "That's just how life is." But as the level of consciousness begins to rise, this cycle becomes visible. A person pauses for a moment and realizes, "I've experienced this before." This sentence is not a complaint. This sentence is awareness itself, and the moment awareness arises, the cycle can no longer function as before. At this point, the mind intervenes and tries to produce an explanation. It constructs logic, finds reasons, writes stories, because the mind's job is to control. Where it cannot control, it becomes restless. Consciousness, however, is not concerned with control. Consciousness is concerned with the experience itself. Therefore, the observer effect is strengthened not by mental effort, but by inner withdrawal. Withdrawal is not giving up. Withdrawal is allowing oneself to observe what is happening. The mind's recognition reflex constantly speaks to you from the past. "I know this. I've experienced this. This is how it ends." This inner voice is very convincing because it is fed by past data. But at the quantum level, the past is only an archive of possibilities. The future depends on which of these archives is chosen. The choice is made not by thought, but by consciousness. Wherever consciousness stands, reality takes shape. That's why some people experience great changes, while others remain in the same emotional cycle for years. The conditions may be the same, the opportunities similar. The only difference is the point of observation. When the point of observation changes, the mind's recognition reflex is momentarily confused, because the patterns it knows no longer work. This confusion opens a new space in consciousness, a silent, undefined, but vast space. When this space emerges, a person may feel a strange emptiness. They neither fully belong to the old, nor clearly see the new. This emptiness is not disturbing, just unusual. The mind wants to fill this space, rushes to give it a name, but this space exists not to be filled, but to be felt. Because the quantum effect finds its strongest form in this undefined state, in the realm of unchosen possibilities. The observer effect deepens precisely here. Consciousness begins to look not with an automatic recognition reflex, but with conscious awareness. Even the same events are felt differently. The same words resonate differently, because experience transforms not because reality changes, but because the perspective from which you view it changes. And when this transformation begins, no matter how much the mind resists, the old order cannot continue in the same way. The quantum field records this shift in consciousness, and reality, albeit with a delay, begins to adapt to this new perspective. There is an important point to understand at this stage. The mind does not truly recognize what it thinks it recognizes. It only establishes a resemblance. Resemblance produces a sense of security, and this sense of security keeps consciousness on the same track. That is why many people who want change unknowingly reproduce the old reality. While thinking they are making a new beginning, they continue to look from the old point of view. In the quantum field, this is like shining the same projector on a different scene. Even if the scene changes, the image remains familiar. When consciousness becomes aware of this cycle, it can no longer keep up with the mind's pace. While the mind is still trying to name, classify, and make sense of things, consciousness shifts to a broader field of perception. This transition is silent, unostentatious, and imperceptible from the outside. But inside, a profound clarity emerges. There are periods in life when everything feels like it revolves around the same center. Different scenes, different people, changing circumstances exist. Yet the inner experience is almost the same. The same emotional responses, similar disappointments, familiar hopes repeat themselves. While this is often perceived as a game played by the outside world, at the quantum level, it's called a cosmic cycle. A cosmic cycle occurs when consciousness remains at a certain frequency for an extended period. Consciousness accepts its familiar vibration as safe and organizes reality around it. Thus, while time seems to move forward, experience takes on a circular motion. The most striking feature of this cycle is its invisibility. Often, people don't realize they're in the cycle. They simply say, "Something similar happened again," and move on. But when consciousness reaches a certain maturity, the cycle begins to reveal itself. A moment comes when, more than the event itself, the mark it leaves on you catches your attention. You notice the automaticity of your reaction. You feel like you're stuck in the same spot. This feeling indicates that you're approaching the center of the cosmic cycle, because cycles only begin to unravel when they are recognized. A brief moment of awareness is usually silent. It doesn't come as a great enlightenment or a powerful burst of emotion. It's more like an inner pause. The mind stops speaking for a moment. The inner voice slows down, and a small gap forms. This gap is where consciousness switches off autopilot. At that moment, the power of past experiences diminishes. Time expands. This few-second awareness creates a powerful effect in the quantum field, because consciousness has sensed for the first time that it doesn't have to continue the same cycle. Cosmic cycles are not fate. They are the natural consequence of a lack of awareness. When consciousness learns to observe itself, the binding nature of the cycles decreases. Even if the same event occurs, the inner response changes. Reaction gives way to observation. Observation opens the door to choice. This choice doesn't have to manifest as a conscious decision. Often, it is simply felt as an inner withdrawal. But this withdrawal is a sign that consciousness is shifting its center. The quantum field is more concerned with orientations than intentions. Wherever consciousness looks, possibilities concentrate. As long as the cosmic cycle continues, consciousness always looks in the same direction. When the moment of awareness arrives, the perspective shifts slightly. While this small shift may seem insignificant from the outside, it initiates a major reorganization at the quantum level. This is because reality takes the perspective of consciousness as its reference point. When the perspective changes, reality adapts, albeit with a delay. This brief moment of awareness often disturbs the mind, as it perceives the disruption of its accustomed order as a threat. It generates explanations, creates doubt, and distracts, but consciousness silently moves forward beneath this noise. Awareness doesn't retreat. It simply becomes invisible, and after a while, the person realizes that although they seem to be in the same cycle, they are no longer in the same place. Their internal position has changed. This is precisely where the cosmic cycle breaks. The cycle is broken not by changes in external events, but by the shift in the internal point of reference. A brief moment of awareness liberates consciousness from old patterns. This liberation doesn't happen suddenly, but layer by layer. But once it begins, it is irreversible. because consciousness can no longer ignore what it sees. The quantum effect deepens at this point, and reality begins to reshape itself according to consciousness's new stance. When this moment of awareness arises, people often tend to dismiss it. They want to move on, saying, "It was just a thought or a fleeting feeling." But at the quantum level, small moments of awareness open big doors, because consciousness operates with quality, not quantity. A second of clarity can be more transformative than years of automatic living. This moment is when consciousness sees its own cycle from the outside for the first time. And this vision leaves an irreversible mark. The cosmic cycle continues as long as it remains unnoticed. The moment it is noticed, it begins to lose its power. Because cycles are nourished by unconscious participation. When consciousness knows it is watching, it doesn't play the same role in the same way. Reactions are delayed, emotions are not as intense as before, and the meaning of events begins to unravel. This unraveling can create a feeling of emptiness. Every person carries a frequency signature without realizing it. This signature isn't written on their identity documents. It's not directly visible to others, but it constantly emits signals in the quantum field. Thoughts, emotions, recurring inner monologues, and long-standing beliefs shape this signature. Over time, consciousness becomes accustomed to a specific vibration and perceives this vibration as its center. Thus, reality highlights possibilities that are compatible with this center. People often attribute their experiences to chance, fate, or circumstances. However, at the quantum level, every experience is a natural reflection of the frequency signature. This signature is not fixed, but it feels permanent. This is because consciousness wants to maintain the vibration it's accustomed to. What is familiar provides security. The known area provides peace. Therefore, even when a desire for change arises, an internal resistance occurs. While a person may think they are choosing a new direction, they may continue to view things from the same internal frequency. In this case, the goals change, the scene changes, but the essence of the experience remains similar. As long as the frequency signature doesn't change, the language of reality doesn't change either. The point of choice emerges precisely here. This point isn't a moment of great decision, nor is it a dramatic break noticed in the external world. The point of choice is the moment consciousness becomes aware of its own vibration. A person crosses this threshold when they first sense, "I am not merely experiencing what I am experiencing, I am perceiving it at a specific frequency." This intuition removes consciousness from being a passive receiver. The observer is no longer just a witness. They become a conscious direction setter. The frequency signature changes not through intentions, but through states of being. Simply wanting, simply wishing, simply thinking is not enough. When the stance of consciousness changes, the signature begins to change as well. This stance is often related to silence. It is about not reacting, not rushing, not maintaining automatic patterns. A person pauses for a moment and withdraws internally. This withdrawal is not escape. It is the repositioning of consciousness's own center. At this point, the quantum field comes into play. The field works not with words, but with vibration. Wherever consciousness stands, possibilities concentrate. The point of choice represents the threshold where consciousness decides whether to continue with the old vibration or not. This decision does not occur as a mental debate. Rather, it is felt as an inner clarity. The person realizes they no longer want to react in the same way as before. Following the old path feels heavy. This heaviness indicates that transformation has begun. When the frequency signature begins to change, the external world doesn't immediately change. This process requires patience, because reality tests the new stance of consciousness. Old scenes may reappear for a short time. This is not to pull consciousness back, but to solidify the new frequency. If consciousness does not revert to old habits at this stage, the signature becomes clearer. Each clear frequency calls forth new possibilities suited to it. After the point of choice is passed, one feels lighter. The need for control decreases. The effort to forcibly direct life slows down, because consciousness is no longer against the flow, but in harmony with it. This harmony is not passivity. It is the state of being in the right place at the right time. At the quantum level, this state creates the most powerful field of influence. The frequency signature and the point of choice are a natural part of the maturation process of consciousness. This is not a privilege, nor is it a superiority. This is an accessible threshold for every consciousness ready to perceive. The person who passes this threshold does not claim that life has completely changed, but they clearly feel this. Even if they are in the same reality, they are no longer in the same state of consciousness, and the quantum field inevitably reflects this change, albeit with a delay. At this stage, many people want to see immediate, tangible results of the change in their frequency signature. They expect different people, more fluid opportunities, less resistance. But in the quantum field, change doesn't always begin externally. First, internal references are resolved. People realize they are no longer as attached to certain things as before. Reactions weaken. Expectations quieten. The need for control recedes. This withdrawal is not indifference. It is the consciousness lightening its own weight. And this lightness is the first sign that the frequency signature is being readjusted. The point of choice is therefore not a single moment, but a process. Consciousness revisits this point every day, in every interaction. Returning to the old frequency is always possible because habit is strong. But once awareness is formed, the returns are no longer unconscious. The person knows what they are doing. This state of knowing produces the clearest signal in the quantum field, because consciousness no longer exists with automatic reactions, but with the stance it chooses. And as this stance solidifies, reality begins to reshape itself according to this new frequency. Meta-observation is the capacity to watch events unfold without attempting to alter them. This doesn't mean disconnecting from emotions or distancing oneself from life. Rather, it's about learning to remain at the very center of the experience without clinging to it. When consciousness reaches this point, it isn't drawn into events, it encounters them with awareness. Thoughts arise, emotions rise, the body reacts, but consciousness remains a constant witness behind all of this. This is precisely where liberation begins, because what limits a person isn't the events themselves, but the automatic identification with them. When meta-observation kicks in, the mind continues to operate with its old reflexes. It produces judgments, labels, and constructs scenarios. But this process is no longer unconscious. The person becomes aware that the mind is speaking. This awareness diminishes the power of thoughts, because thoughts are manipulative as long as they are not noticed. When they are noticed, they become merely temporary content. When consciousness moves from being the owner of thoughts to being an observer, a feeling of inner expansion arises. This expansion often comes with an unexpected lightness. Life may contain the same difficulties, conditions may remain just as complex, but the feeling of burden diminishes, because consciousness no longer interprets everything as a personal threat or success. What happens is seen as the natural flow of experience. This perspective does not create passivity. On the contrary, it leads to clearer and more balanced responses. People begin to intuitively discern what to intervene in and what to let go of. Meta-observation also transforms the perception of time. The influence of the past weakens, the pressure of the future lessens. Consciousness becomes more deeply rooted in the present moment. This rooting does not require mental effort. It is not a forced practice. It is more like the release of unnecessary tension. When consciousness lets go of the constant need to correct things, it approaches its natural state, and this natural state produces the most harmonious frequency at the quantum level. The concept of liberation should not be misunderstood here. This is not about giving up everything or withdrawing from life. Liberation is the dissolution of internal dependencies. When the invisible bonds to outcomes, reactions, approval, and control loosen, consciousness relaxes. This relaxation allows for a healthier relationship with the outside world. People no longer try to forcibly direct life. They learn to move with life. As meta-observation deepens, one begins to question the need to define oneself with specific identities. Phrases like, "This is who I am," "I always experience this," and "this is my destiny" lose their power. Because consciousness sees that these definitions are temporary, identities become tools used within experience. Consciousness is not completely confined to any one role. This flexibility is a very valuable signal in the quantum field. Flexible consciousness attracts broader possibilities. At this point, liberation is not experienced as a sudden break. It is felt more as a quiet stability. The person no longer feels the need to constantly defend themselves. Reactions soften. Internal noise decreases. Life begins to flow with less resistance. This flow is not a loss of control. It is the dissolution of the illusion of control. A deep confidence emerges when consciousness realizes that it does not need to control everything. Meta-observation and liberation are the maturing phases of consciousness. In this phase, the person cares not about what they experience, but about how they observe. Because when observation changes, experience also changes. The quantum field does not have to immediately reflect this change, but when this clarity in consciousness is fixed, reality inevitably adapts to it. And even while the external world is still in motion, the individual clearly feels internally free. At this stage, consciousness learns to create a natural distance from everything that is happening. This distance is not coldness, it is clarity. The individual no longer gets lost in their emotions or is swept along by their thoughts. They know what they are feeling, but simultaneously realize that what they are feeling is not themselves. This dual awareness creates an inner balance. The waves of life continue to come, but consciousness no longer closes itself off from these waves. It allows them to pass through. As meta-observation takes root, the individual's relationship with themselves fundamentally changes. The need to constantly correct, complete, or transform oneself weakens. Consciousness begins to move not from a missing point, but from an already existing center. This center is silent, unassuming, and powerful. At the quantum level, the clearest signal emanates precisely from this inner consistency, because a liberated consciousness does not force reality, it guides it in its natural state. None of what has been described up to this point is intended to convince you of anything. This is not a transmission of doctrine or a presentation of a belief system. This is a way for consciousness to remind you of its own movement. The new reality does not appear as a gift from the outside. It is a realm that already opens up when the place where consciousness stands shifts. What you have experienced so far is a chain of experiences that brought you here. None of them were in vain, none were wrong. They were all meant to show you what consciousness experienced at a particular frequency. What we call the new reality should not be thought of as a completely different scene of life. It is an experience lived in the same world, under similar conditions, but from a different state of consciousness. People often expect change to come from the outside. They want conditions to improve, people to change, time to arrive at the right moment. But at the quantum level, what sets reality in motion is not waiting. What sets reality in motion is consciousness no longer wanting to remain at its old point of observation. This invitation is not made loudly. Life does not say to you, "Change now." This invitation comes as a silent realization. It arises in those moments when you feel that you are standing somewhere else, internally, while doing the same things. In those moments when you pause instead of reacting, wait instead of rushing, and observe instead of controlling. These moments seem small, but in the quantum realm, they are pivotal, because it is precisely in these moments that consciousness aligns with a new timeline. The transition to the new reality is not a rupture. The old life doesn't need to be completely erased. People, the past, memories, and relationships persist. What changes is the quality of the connection with them. The bond loosens, the weight lessens, the feeling of obligation dissolves. Consciousness no longer has to carry the experience. It passes through the experience. The lightness that emerges in this transition is the source of the peace many people have long sought. This invitation also involves responsibility. As consciousness expands, one can no longer attribute everything to external conditions. One becomes aware of one's own frequency, one's own point of observation. In the quantum realm, this intelligence is the organization of possibilities with minimal resistance. This invitation doesn't come to everyone at the same time. It is heard when consciousness is ready. It cannot be forcibly summoned or accelerated. But once heard, it is not entirely ignored. A person may ignore it for a while, postpone it, or be preoccupied with other things. Yet, this invitation persists in the background of consciousness. What happens in the outside world doesn't disrupt inner balance as much as before. While accepting the fluctuating nature of life, a person also discovers a stable area within themselves. This area is a point where one can exist without doing anything. And the strongest alignment at the quantum level occurs here. Accepting this invitation doesn't require a special ritual or a dramatic decision. It happens through small but conscious pauses in daily life. Stopping for a moment. Postponing a reaction. Not pursuing a thought. These small shifts allow consciousness to settle into the new reality, and over time, a person realizes, peace didn't come because life changed. Life began to change because peace settled in. This realization is the clearest indication that the new reality is no longer a possibility, but a lived experience. If you want to stay in this state of consciousness, subscribe to our channel. In the comments below, write the following sentence exactly. I recognize the quantum effect. This is not a wish, but a statement of observation.